casual almost I want to do these warm-up exercises. I want to really loosen up my hand. So for this one, I'm going to use colored pencil, and I'm going to do a blind contour drawing. What is a blind contour drawing? Well, I'm going to pick a spot, get a general sense of my proportion, and while looking at my reference, I am going to focus on the negative space, meaning the shape around our subject, almost like drawing the shapes of the air or the space, the negative space around our subject. And you can actually see it easier. You could do this right-handed if you're right-handed, or try left-handed if you're right-handed, and or opposite hand. If you're left-handed, you would do it with right hand. And see how that works. And just follow one continuous line all the way through. If you have to step over it, bring it back. And do I get to look at my paper? Am I looking at my paper? Yes, I am. I get to look at it every 1 second, every 10 seconds. So the idea is to follow the line, follow the exterior shape of the entire contour with one line. So we basically created a silhouette here. Let me go back to my spot. So I take a peek at my paper and continue really switching over to my right brain, which handles space, and seeing the shapes of the things I don't want to name, especially when I get in here, all these beautiful things that happen here. Just being able to see them as shapes with values and interpret that with simple lines. I know I may be going a little too slow or a little too fast. For you, you really want to maintain a pace that is on the slower end of the spectrum. When you do blind contour, the longer it takes for you to work the line, the better it feels, the better it looks in the end, the more chance you have to not just glance or look, but observe and really take it in. And again, we're doing this as warm-up exercise, so there's a little bit of casual effect that I want with the line. I'm going to begin to loosen it up even more here, where I'm almost 100% blind contour now. And then it comes down to a decision of what information do I need to add here. Already, I could recognize this as probably a person with a hat. Most people would identify that, wearing some sort of a jacket with a vest and some old style of neck and tie. And when we begin to do this, that's when the left brain tries to take over again. Oh, and you name the word, using language instead of image. So trying as hard as possible to not identify the verbal aspect of what you're drawing, but instead the simple line and shape of it. This is what takes practice to achieve. In time, you're doing all of it simultaneously. You're deciding what goes in, what stays out in terms of information. You're telling a story, and you're adjusting line, space, relationships between those lines and spaces and shapes. So the ideal would be for you not to include an extra layer, which makes it very difficult, and that would be identification and language. Because the symbol of what you think you're drawing takes over. So make sure, if you are feeling that your pace is beginning to speed up, pause. Make a quick pause. And the other objective of this is to get so familiar with our subject for our next 2, 3, 4 sketches. And that's another key thing that I should mention. thinking your way through as a sketch. What you want to do is maintain, and I'm really, really pressing on this, maintain a mindset of sketch, of looseness with the hand, with the gestures. I'm going to begin to add just a little bit of color here. Well, color meaning value, saturation, some line work, and be open to, well, it's not just the one continuous line. I could do a little bit of scumble. I'm beginning to look at light and shadow, some of the bone structure and muscle. And the idea for this was loosen up. I don't want a photographic replica portrait of Charles Chaplin or Charlie Chaplin. What I want is to begin to express and feel a little bit ready to draw. So this was color pencil, if you need to label it, or pencil, color pencil, and there we have it. So this would be our warm-up sketch number 1. Now, if you're in the mood for it and you're ready to do, I'm just going to go ahead and use the opposite side here. I thought I was going to do 2, but it's going to be a little crowded, and should I? Let's see. Yeah, I guess so. You can maintain a visual on this. So for this one, if you're ready and you want to, just go ahead and flip your reference upside down. So sketch number 2, I'm going to work it upside down, but I'm also going to work with a different medium here. I'm going to work with this ink pen, and I plan to maybe wash after the fact some of the lines, and feel really how the brain struggles to make sense of what's going on here. So this is really taking contour, negative space drawing to where it needs to, how it should feel. The struggle is identifying almost abstract shapes. The moment you catch yourself making up things that you think, oh, well, it's hair, so I'm just going to draw hair, you moved away from what we're supposed to be doing, what you want to be trying to do here, which is, it's that example that I always show, the face vase. Right now, you really want to focus on those faces, which are the shapes outside of our subject. Now, if this is not making sense, it will make sense in a second. I'm going to begin to loosen up my line. It's not just a continuous blind contour. A lot of it is blind contour. I'm really feeling my left brain fighting, struggling to take over. But the right brain, no, pause, measure, look closely, and just copy what you see. It is very zen. You need to be almost in a blank state of mind where all you see is the line and the shape and the value. And somehow your subconscious is what begins to add context, narrative, expression, gesture to what then almost, well, it is defined as your style. You notice that the struggle with portraits and blind contour or negative space or upside down drawing is the moment we enter these very familiar areas. So make sure you do a first, second take. Give it a good look. Don't overthink it. we're not going, I mean, style. I mentioned the word style. Eventually, your signature style. It is the way you see. It is the way you decide to edit the information you see. But I really want you to truly play with this portrait today. My goal is to, after doing 1 or 2, probably 3 warm-ups or tests, because I'm also testing what material I think is going to look great for this portrait, or just the one that feels right for today. You could be doing 5, 6, 10 of them if you wished. And they are, again, they're not speed drawings. They're experiments, they're warm-ups, and at the same time, they're also showing you, hopefully, inspiring you to, ooh, this feels good. What if I were to do a new place? Or maybe just sharpening the skills of what you already know works and love. And having a chance to play with that a little more. Now, the lighting on this portrait is really, well, it's an old photo. It's also not the greatest quality of image, I would say, in terms of resolution. But I kept it pretty neutral, not high contrast, where the focus on the contrast here would be just the black and white. And we have several black areas or gray, more neutral areas. Now I'm doing this also upside down so you could try as best as you can continue the mindset that we were bringing along. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush here, and I have this pen brush, which I can control the moisture, the water flow just a little bit better by squeezing or not squeezing. And I'm also going to be using a paper towel to lift some of this extra ink and be able to play with some of the grayer shapes, such as these, trying to manage the values and the contrast of this image a little bit better. As I mentioned, the light, I could pretty much come up with anything I want here. There's not much to the lighting in the face. Obviously, we do have some interesting things here. Don't even have to touch these, but let's go ahead and make it consistent. And then under the eyes, where it gets a little bit grayer, and even bringing paper towel to lift lots of the ink. And just play with that. Beginning to take it a little closer to sort of a painted portrait more than anything. And again, all of these different techniques, following the one that you love. Let's go ahead and flip it upside down. That's the true test. Well, there's a nice expression coming along. A little too much ink right under here. So this would allow me maybe to bring in acrylic or gouache and put some of that back in. If I were to do that with some washes and then bring in gouache to bring light, since it's not just watercolor. So there's 1 and 2. Now the third choice would be just for fun to test a new material, and you can choose upside down or right side up. Which one felt better? Which one feels like it could help you get those lines? So I'm going to go with a little... Well, actually, I mentioned this would be a good time to test on Bristol. So I'm going to bring our Bristol pad, And I'm going to take a little longer with this one. So this would be my, I guess I like to think of it as a warm-up, but it's going to be a little longer than a warm-up. I'm going to be playing with these materials, which are water-soluble markers or inks that are just like the one I did here. A little more controlled. There's also water-soluble graphite or water-soluble watercolor pencils. Any of those, because I plan to play a little bit with the wash. And I also have, if I need, some ink. And I did mention these bamboo drawing tools. So, or brush. The options are infinite. But I do want to, I'm going to flip this upside down. And I'm going to do it upside down again. It's just a good challenge. Now, can I... This would be a quick question. Can I use a couple of pencil lines, get it started, even if it's upside down, blind contour, or a little bit of blocking and whatever drawing method you wish to do, and then bring in some ink? Absolutely. The idea for you to play with that. And do I have to just follow one continuous line? No, you can actually do any type of drawing method. And I'm getting started here. So let's go all the way here at the top and begin. I'm closing one eye, by the way. My blind contour, when you close one eye, you flatten the image or the negative space even more. And I'm doing just a little extra gesture to some of this line and really trying to nail the negative space shapes that I see for the start here. Following some of those relationships to the other side, so you're also getting your proportion and a composition on the page that you're going to be happy with. As I said, this is still sort of a warm-up. It's also a test. I'm using water-soluble pencil for these early lines, and then I'm going to go in with a tool that I rarely use for portraits like this, and that's a good challenge. And it will be these water-soluble markers, and I will show you what they do. Another option that I wanted to test as a warm-up would be a charcoal or graphite portrait. Just playing with those beautiful values and some of those beautiful things you see, subtle shading in the face, behind the nose, under the mouth, and all around the eyes. Like this could be a beautiful eye portrait, meaning more and more focus on those eyes. And just practicing the way you see, practicing your expression, the possibilities of the range of expression that you have to tell us just a little beyond the face, the personality. When you do a portrait, something a little extra that you want to put in there. And obviously with photography, that's not what we're going for here. We're going more for that gesture, that expressive drawing for narrative in a way. Well, it's drawing for fun. And in this case, showing us a little bit of the way you're feeling today through lines. Is it energetic? Is it more tamed and soft and patient? Is it experimental? Do I have to pick one of those? Whether you want it or not, it will show up. Sometimes having a little extra coffee in the morning shows up. Some of the lines, not as soft, a little rougher, or a little faster, or a little jittery. And that could be, ooh, how do I do that? Well, I guess I have to drink more coffee then. Sounds silly, but it does work that way. So I got good pencil lines going here, and I'm ready to maybe do a few washes. Bring some of that in. So almost the entire way squinting and closing one eye to see this better. Entering the area of difficulty where our left brain tries to take over. Don't let it. Here, right in this area, is where you need that sharpness of knowing what you're thinking about, knowing who's in control, and you want to be in control by letting go of control. Wait, what? It kind of works that way. For you to be in control, it means you absolutely took control so you could let go of control in a way. And it would absolutely show in your lines through the way you see it. Staying sharp, focused on those things that are important here. Simple as lines and shapes. And like I said, they don't even have to be in the right proportion or right position. This could be a playful, very playful exploration of variations of portrait, to the point where we've discussed it could start becoming something abstract. Again, drawing this upside down and knowing my brain of course recognize what's going on here and struggling to clear it up, blank mind, and just focus on shape and negative space. A little bit of curve on the face. And I begin to see a little bit of cheekbone, so I'm going to scumble. You could crosshatch. You could keep it clean. But I'm going to play, and I meant really play with some of these, where you're saying, oh, wait, why is he adding so many scumbly lines there? You'll see that with my first wash, and I can bring a little bit of contrast and darker lines with the pens, it would probably enrich the quality. It's interesting how you barely see the top of the lip, but you do see a little shade of it. And that very, very small pupil with some really beautiful highlights inside the eye. And again, not to mention those words, I'm not thinking about them as I'm finishing. Let's go ahead and flip this upside down now that we're done with the upside down exercise. And there it is. I'm happy. I'm going to apply a quick wash to some of these lines. And I wanted to do just a small area. I don't want to do it down here because I know this is a little bit softer because it's a watercolor pencil. It's almost a water-soluble graphite, actually. It reads as a water-soluble watercolor pencil, but it gives you the look of water-soluble graphite, which I love. So I want to do a little bit of that here inside the eye, which is going to be very light gray, almost as if I penciled the graphite in. It's going to have those low values, but all the way around the eyes. As it's what really captivates me about this portrait. What he's doing with the eyes and the lighting and the shadows around the eyes. As you can see, I'm using a paper towel. Lift some of that up. If you're working with washes, thinking about layering some of the light, absolute light grays early on, so that you can then bring in a little bit of layering and play with that as you build it up. Let's go ahead and take care of the other eye with the nice, beautiful glare there. Now the light and the nose, here's where I get a little tight. So I want to keep it loose. I want to keep it, yes, it's becoming a little more painterly, but I want to keep it gestural in terms of drawing, just the same type of stroke with the brush as I was trying to work with the pencil, which is more streaky rather than painterly. What does that mean? Well, the idea of brushing and as opposed to drawing with the brush, there's a very, very fine line when one starts becoming the other, because you could kind of begin to paint with pencil by thickening and working more, instead of the line, more the value. Here with the brush, I'm trying to draw some of this soft. And remember, I'm on Bristol here, so I'm beginning to like some of those soft grays. And I could just bring some more layers as this dries, a little darker. This is the way I would develop that. But I want to do mixed media. So I'm going to work in with this darker water-soluble pen, which I just used in the previous version. I'm going to bring in some of the darker areas just to get the full contrast of where I want this to go in terms of dark, which you would generally do slowly by building it up. But I just want to see what kind of line we're going to get from that. Let's go ahead and add just a few touches here. And also, if you're doing water-soluble inks, you want to make sure you get a good feel of what that ink is going to give you in terms of not just contrast, blackness, but also the temperature of them. Sometimes they're grayer or bluer or browner, depending on the type of ink. And again, that only happens through tests and practice. I added some right here, so I'm going to draw a little bit of shadow and darkness into these eyebrows. Again, it's not eyebrows. I didn't mean to say that word. It's just this shape here. That's how you want to think of it. And I'm going to bring a little leftover of that ink. So I didn't add ink lines where I'm brushing now. I'm just bringing some of that leftover ink that's on the brush over to this area where I could control it just a little bit better. And just wash it off. And one more. As it dries, you could come just in and around it, soften up a little bit of that edge. One last line that I added here, because as I squint, I see a little spot of dark right in this area here. Using lots of paper towel and even paper towel itself to take moisture away from the brush and control all of this a little bit better. So we still have some of that water-soluble pencil from the early sketch releasing some soft grays, but now it doesn't really affect. It adds all the way through. Let me go ahead and take care of this while this dries. I'm going to bring in these water-soluble markers. As you can see, the cap, this is much darker gray than this, the middle, and this a lighter. I'm going to try to play, this is why I wanted to test this. I want to see if, with a brush, bring in some, let's say, some crosshatch here, or some scumble, and really begin to play. So let's start with the small test, just a few lines like that. And again, I will do this because I'm not too familiar with it. And let's see what, oh, there's that temperature. So it does release a lot of pigment. Let's go ahead and lift some of that up. A little too wet, and we're on Bristol, not watercolor paper. So I want to lift a little bit of that and make sure I get a little bit of light coming over to this side. So we'll do a little bit of watercolor effect and let that dry again. Now if it bothers you, the difference in temperature, see how these are much warmer, also darker blacks than these bluer, grayer, cooler colors from the marker. And I think it would look nice, switching over to this one here, where instead of the brush, I'm just going to use the tip. And I'm just going to add some lines as I see in the suit here. Begin to add just a little bit of, some of it will stay the longer I wait to bring in the water. And really begin to play mad scientist moment where you get to test some of these effects. Let's go ahead and stop there. That was just a little bit of line. It's a lighter, well, it's actually dark gray, but it's not black marker. So we're going to see what this looks like and see if we get a little bit of that line to remain. And it does. So it is softer. It brings just a little different quality than what we did with the hat. And we'll revisit that. Let's bring this back in and use some of the line here. Just a little bit cleaner without overdoing it. Almost going over that pencil line, which is why I wanted to demo that. You could just do a couple pencil lines, and how would you bring that back in? You could just leave it like that. It works with some of that previous gray layer, but I want to bring in just a little bit extra. And I'm going to just again tap some streaks of brush to create movement, shadow, light in there. Let's go back up. Mix media. Bring this pen back in. And the idea here would be to integrate some of the color, now that it's a little drier, into the shadows underneath, along with variations in the upper part of the hat. So remember how specific in terms of the information you want to apply here. Do you need to be? It's not a matter of realism. It's always an abstraction. You're identifying and you're deciding what and what not to add. Because unless you were photocopying this, and even then, it won't be the same. Getting a little more playful with some of this brush stroke. Looseness is what I've been really pushing. What does that mean? it starts with looseness in the mind, playfulness, willingness to try and risk in order to have fun. So it's literally becoming a child again. That's the goal. Being able to do what you used to do when you were a toddler. But with a little more intellect or knowledge. So it's getting a little too wet. Layer after layer. And I want to bring in here, a great idea would be to bring in maybe some micron pens, so softer lines of ink with a different quality of, say, scumble or parallel hatches, just to bring in a little bit of that volume and extra contrast. So yes, I will finish it up with some of these types of lines. Lots of looseness. I'm going to really aim for lots of looseness while still maintaining a little bit of control over the overall image. I'm waiting for one more thing here too. I want to use that gray, which is this lightest gray marker right at the edge of the eyes for that final bit of contrast. And this one would benefit so much for a nice little speck of light, which I'm going to do here as well. So there's a little bit of stippling, there's a little bit of crosshatch, a little bit of scumbling. And the decisions of what type of line. When I stop looking at my reference, I could be in trouble. You want to be looking at it the entire time, picking up. Reminder, this is an exercise, above all, more than anything, in observation. You're practicing your drawing skills while training for better observation skills and allowing yourself to just have fun with it. A little bit of expression with some of the direction and the pull on the eyebrow here. Trying to do that a little bit better. There's a little angle to the face which I should have pointed out early on, but I'm sure you caught it. And that is a little tilt to the side. So noticing that also adds a little bit to the angling of these shapes, at least visually. But if you were to look at it and measure it, the angles, how this bottom is way higher than the bottom of this one. And I could keep working and getting more and more specific as I develop more and more detail. Remember, be cautious. How far do you want to cook it without overcooking it? A good sense of patience and pace to not get there too fast where it's too late to pull back. And that is a very important, probably one of the most important things as you continue your practice. How far do you take it? Can you do with a lot less? I should mention something. I recently just finished the move, and it applies to, I should be able to do with less, and I mean stuff. It's one of the things about moving. You do an accounting and you're like, really? Do I really need this? In drawing, bringing that same philosophy, do I really? And it's sometimes hard to let go, but you could really benefit from less is more philosophy. So very interesting things happening here with how I decide to finish up some of the early lines while waiting for a little more dry time to add one close to a final layer here. So this is not water soluble. It'll be safe to wash right over it. I'm going to bring in this lighter version of gray. So there's these three, and there's plenty more. But as you can see, we use the black, we use the medium gray. Now we're using this light gray. I just want to see how it works to paint over. And immediately, yeah, as expected, it's going to create this soft version of shadow here, which I could just apply in and around over some of these lines. Notice here how I can just bring in some of the shadow. I want to wash that just a little bit. Maybe it's a little too heavy. Lighten it up. Hard edge, too hard. Do that on the other side. A little bit on the eye, bringing more contrast and allowing that little highlight to really be showcased now. And understanding, remembering that it's about lines, it's about shapes, and today we did a lot of negative space shapes, but you also have shapes and lines that create shapes within the face. To developing the form through light. So contrast, values, how to bring those together and how they balance with the line work to create a fully complete image, and how you decide to, it's really manipulate the word, to make use, effective use, controlled use of those elements. I'm going to go back to that middle gray and add a little extra shadow right here. Right here. Just a little extra. Now, I'm at the point where, okay, this is almost beginning to look like a watercolor painting, is it? Because there's a lot of wash. The line is being now just a bit overpowered, even though it's there. Does it need a background? Do I need to push it further? I love some of this happening up here, where I just dropped line and water, and it really began to even cauliflower and puddle and edge. Even with a little bit of harder line. Let me add a couple of lines here. Make this just a touch darker on this side. And wash that in. Ooh, nice. And it immediately becomes way darker. Bring some of that over. Adding more shadows, which is what really gives you that feel of depth, space. not just for portraits, but for everything. And I will set this aside as portrait 1 is finished. So what else could I do to this image? Well, I'm going to test a different paper. And this, I think I took it a little further than I really wanted. Intentionally, that line, the washes, and the more you begin to feel, ooh, loving what's going on, you push it too far and you get very near that place where it could have been overcooked. How much further should I have pulled back? And so let's do that now. Let's try it with this next one. So I was going to try watercolor, but before I do that, I'm going to go with this. This is, again, sort of a Bristol, but it's softer on the, with the, I'm blanking out. So different papers, and the way they are pressed and the way they are mixed in a way. And I am forgetting the word for watercolor papers. What makes them specifically watercolor papers very different than others. So one of the added ingredients here is missing from the Bristol to what becomes color pencil. Very soft, obviously, with soft surface. Ink lines are going to be great. I'm going to go ahead and use just my ink. And I wanted to draw with these tools. Now these are kind of like nib pens, but they're just made out of bamboo. Van Gogh used to draw with these, which is, if you've ever seen his ink drawings, they are impressive. And I'm going to use very simple lines to start off. Drawing method. I've been using mostly a bit of the blind contour, negative space. I'm going to stick with that since it's been working pretty well. Now this ink, my question would be, is it water soluble or is it permanent? Well, one quick test. And this, as you let it dry a little longer, becomes permanent ink. It doesn't really give you the washes unless you do it early on and you mix. So some of the big early lines I want to do again, adding more gesture. A lot of variation to the play with line. And what I want you to feel is how precise, and the word precise is very, we can debate what that means when drawing. In terms of precision of what? The technique? Or is it the precision of the way the artist is seeing the subject and the quality of line, which I stress a lot, that brings more than just the likeness, in this case of a portrait, but the creativity, the qualities of observation, editing, and line gesture coming together. So I'm really going for that. And you'll notice I'll be dashing and scumbling and hatching. This is not a speed test. You know, you could be very slow as you develop this. And I'm also looking at areas of light and dark. Some of this that I added up here, I could do darker if I wanted. It takes a little time. Identify shape, the value of the shape. But overall, it's going to be the quality of line here. And that word, precision, is it something that I could begin to move my idea of it, my concept of? It starts with how we talk about it. What's good drawing, bad drawing? Most would begin to define what does that mean by the concept of precision. So then you dissect that a little further. What do you mean by precision? Precision of what? The likeness meaning. And that's when you begin to, okay, well, it could be about, you are doing sort of a interpretation of the information presented to you. Coming down here to the lines. And obviously I mentioned the editing and the rearrangement in some cases. And it just so happens that when you see artists really go completely away and give you something new, let's think of Picasso, what he would do with a portrait like this, pushing it beyond what the way you see to a new place where you go, whoa, now is that precision? No, that's creativity. Is it creativity? Is it allowing yourself to really just explore what you have to give, what you have to offer? Which always comes down to observing, interpreting, and then describing through lines and gestures. Obviously, I'm adding one more here, which is the choice of medium. And that, I think, also is a big factor. And it's just a bit of a better understanding each time you drop a line. Why and how did I get there? Why did I see it? What was my intention? Also has to do with expectations from the beginning. What are my expectations? And if from the beginning you just set yourself with the mindset of, well, I just want to draw and have fun doing it, maybe set myself up for learning, experimenting with some new form, some new way of doing it, that should be good enough. And it usually is. It's when you really walk away having had lots of fun. I gotta be honest, I'm liking this one already much more. It's more honest too, to what I feel, how I want to bring some of those things together. I'm just adding a little extra. And maybe it's not Charlie Chaplin anymore. Maybe it's just a man with the hat or a hobo with the hat. But some may say, oh yeah, no, it is Charlie Chaplin. And that, again, does that matter? Is that the intention? So getting more familiar with different tools. I wanted to do one today where I was actually going to use no tool other than my fingers. And by using some of this leftover ink, I could use my pinky and maybe even bring some of this finger painting quality. Oops, that was a little too harsh there. Let's try to lift that from the mustache. And test how far this could go. So if you could see here, I'm already beginning to add different values. I tried doing it here. That would have to be revisit it, maybe with some finer line. You can fix this, what seems like a a mess and actually turn that into a nice little cheekbone shadow. Still have a lot of wet ink. So the more you begin to understand the way you see what you're seeing, what you choose to see, because again, there's so much to see here. And our choice to ignore some, whether it's muscle, bone structure, anatomy, light, usually it's light, values. And then do an analysis of why, how am I choosing? Make note of it in case you feel you need to make improvements or corrections to what your expectations were. I think we're going to do one last one. So using the same paper here. So I used ink, the bamboo, used markers. So for this one, I have my charcoal kit here, all my charcoal tools, and I think I'm gonna use some of this soft charcoal, 2 of them, a paper blender, and a brush. That's what I plan to use here. I'm going to set these over, move this a little more. And this would take us all the way through pretty much all the tools I wanted to showcase today. And here we are. So for this one, I'll be using charcoal. A little more looseness in my drawing method. So here I could do a little bit of negative space. I could do a little bit of blind contour. I could do continuous lines, and it's going to allow me to do much more with values and a little more integration between light and value. What do I mean by that? Well, from line, I could really push charcoal, and I'm using a brush here. Notice how from line we almost get, wow, those values already right there. Much more in control of it, especially when we enter the area of facial features. And then to do much more expressive qualities with the medium, I'll bring this paper blender, bring it even outside of our subject. Starting really one of the things is looseness and softness. Unless you need that speed, pace, and harshness of line, an idea to keep it nice and soft and build it up. The hardness of the line. Doing a little more blind contour here, a little bit more gesture on my line. As you can see here, it's full 100% blind contour. It is a little bit looser. Talk about a loose line right there. Finally. See? And on the last one, we finally got it. So was it the medium or was it me that allowed it? Sometimes it's the medium that gets you right there. When you can feel that looseness and freedom with the medium, You fall in love with that medium, and then you push that medium to the places where you expect, once again, expectation, your visuals to be. Just pulling a little from the side of some of this charcoal to create a little bit of volume. Just one stroke with this paper blender gives you light and shadow almost. And I'm using different pressures, so some of it stays darker, some of it becomes lighter. That gentle, softer touch. I'm sure when you look at magazines and wherever you see illustrations, sometimes you don't even need features. You could just do the mustache and a couple lines and it will immediately identify it. It would read as, oh yeah, I know who that is. Not just because it's iconic, but it's because you can take some of the information that absolutely is a must and then showcase that information. Is it the lips and the softness of the bottom lip with the mouth and the... No, it's the contrast between this mustache and the rest of the elements of the face. I'm just going to do a quick looseness here in terms of... Notice that I just drew a couple of circles, almost eggs. And from that, we'll play a little bit with the value of them and what we can do in here. Always thinking, do we need lines at every stage? Sometimes just from value you could bring in really interesting variations. I haven't really brought my eraser, which is my final tool to bring when I use charcoal. You could just bring your kneaded eraser or an eraser to lift light back into it, and didn't really have to do much with the layering. It's pretty much one and done in most of this. But I do like the quality, expressive quality, and most of all the values that were achieved. Let's go into a little bit of finer detail here. You notice how he has that lower, I think it's called mascara, like the eyeliner, the eyeliner on the bottom of the eye, which is just a tiny bit darker than usual. Not a lot we could do with the nose. I could play a little bit with it, but it begins to get risky. It forces me to deal with more light that is not really in or as part of this portrait. But you can do it. You can begin to bring some of those shadows in. And even scumble. Let's go into some scumble here just to finish it up. Just to show you, if you want to really push that looseness, be willing to go all the way. Scumble in some of this light, and you can also bring in scumble some of the with an eraser and bring some of that back. Let me go ahead and do that. I'm just going to use one of these. It's a little newer, so a sharper edge. And then we're going to scumble with an eraser. Bring some of this light back out. So you have double qualities of mark making with shadow and light that really gives it a rich visually. It's something you almost can't pre-plan. It's too gestural to control. It's going to happen and work pretty much as you go. You begin to see if there's an area that needs more, less, and just pull that in, out. Just give them a little shave right around here. Let's use this to sweep it off. And with the brush, I like this softer, again, scumbling motion. So scumble means going in any direction, almost circles, figure eights, circles, eggs, back and forth, up and down, saturating an area. And there we have it. Knowing when to step back and just look at it. So this could also be mixed media. Bringing in extra lines would almost push it a little too far. What I do see is maybe a few washes to make this a little bit more volumetric, give it a little more roundness, so get a better read of the light. If you just stick with charcoal, if you did, and stay with it, that's the safe bet. And then considerations for the background, that would be it.